Good evening, everyone. My name is Neu-Anne Burke, and I am officially welcoming you to Adulting 101. As teenagers, we've always been in this strange period of aging where we're no longer kids, but somehow aren't adults yet. It's like we're weird aliens walking around just trying to fit in however we can. As I entered my last year of high school, I kind of expected it to get easier, but I guess I'm still under construction. There's this quote I always come back to when I think of how we've been growing as people. The future doesn't just happen. We are building it, and we are building it all the time. That's Hannah Fry, brilliant mathematician and author, by the way. But growing up, it's a crazy experience. And I know for a fact we can't get to where we want to be without a little help. Well, maybe a lot of help. And we don't always get it. Sex ed, COVID-19, having a healthy relationship, and how this all affects people of color are things we're expected to deal with and to know. But my question is, where is this being taught, and is our country taking the time to make sure we are properly educated? That's why I call this Adulting 101. We're rejuvenating the things we've never truly learned. Now, I always like to start strong, and I'm not abandoning that here, so let's introduce a topic that's a little controversial to high school life. Sex ed. It's that one class where everyone's just a little uncomfortable and wants to hightail out of there ASAP. Or maybe it's that one class you never had and kind of wish you did. I can understand both sides of the spectrum, but the overall problem here is that not only do some schools not offer sex ed, but if they do, not many take the chance to educate their students in an environment where they feel comfortable enough to participate and ask questions. Abstinence-only education has no effect on the rates at which students decide to have sex. Given that that's its primary goal, it's clear it's ineffective. Have you ever heard of the saying, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing? It's one of those phrases you don't really think about, but definitely know. It expresses the idea that a small amount of knowledge can cause people to overlook details and believe they have all the knowledge they actually need, which can lead to mistakes. Parents and educators presumably want their kids to be as happy and as healthy as possible. But if we don't teach them how to live responsibly, they'll make decisions based on half-baked knowledge and falsified confidence in their choices. Now, I'm not saying our schools have to go around and be the sex patrol and teach kids not to engage in these kinds of activities. The goal is to make sure kids understand themselves, their bodies, and the benefits and consequences to their actions. To get statistical, numerous studies over the past 20 years have consistently demonstrated that comprehensive sex education does not have the negative consequences that most people fear. According to all other studies, providing external condoms in school does not make kids more promiscuous. It keeps them safe. It keeps us safe. Sex ed is important for all genders, but there's a lot of reasons why people who identify as men can benefit from it, especially cisgendered men. As boys grow older, many stop seeking preventative health care, limiting their opportunities to be screened for STIs and other infections. Traditional values on masculinity is one of the most significant risk factors for not seeking treatment. That's why it's all the more important for parents and schools to get involved in making sure we create a safe space where students can address their concerns and questions about themselves and their role in life. Young men must learn early on that taking care of your health does not make you weak. In fact, it only makes you stronger. The lack of sex ed affects every student. Now imagine the effect it has on a young Black woman marginalized by society. Inequalities for Black girls and women are caused by major gaps in access to comprehensive sexuality education. Historically and currently, reproductive rights movements have only focused on the needs of white women, emphasizing access to contraception and abortion. These narratives have frequently ignored the needs of Black girls and women, as well as the critical intersections of race and gender. The history of sex ed is rooted in the same racial bias as it is in healthcare, and as such, it's up to the leaders of the present and us, as the future leaders of tomorrow, to create a framework where everyone, especially people of color, can address their problems, beliefs, identities, and cultures. Now, I feel like I couldn't be here without mentioning this topic at least once. COVID-19, the bane of our existence. Probably the worst thing a teenager could ask for. At first, I loved being able to spend some time in my room and have some me time. That is until some me time became only and always me time for 2.5 years. And I know a lot of you can agree with me out there that COVID took away something important from all of us, and we still haven't fully recovered. As I merged back into fully in-person school, there was something I noticed almost immediately. I had somehow lost the ability to communicate with people who weren't a part of the small group I stayed in contact with during the pandemic. I wondered if this was what it was like for other teenagers as well, especially our grade 12s who barely had a high school experience. I also wondered about my relationship with myself. Even before getting into different kinds of relationships with other people, I had to think about that relationship first. Self-love isn't something we've truly been taught in the first place, so I can imagine our skills are pretty non-existent at this point. If I ever felt insecure about my personality or my outward appearance, I had to remind myself that that is completely normal. But that doesn't mean there's not anything you can do about it. Each person has an inner voice that directs their thoughts and actions, but for most of us, that voice does more harm than good. One statement that isn't said as often as it should be is that being different is normal. It's all about acceptance. Yes, there might always be something you wish you could change about yourself, but a huge part of growing up is accepting that truth and loving yourself anyway. Now, I'm going to get into another controversial topic here. That's not just controversial for teenagers, but pretty much for everyone. Toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity is one of those terms that I feel like a lot of people mention, but not many actually know what it is. Essentially, it is the predisposition to the restrictive and potentially harmful societal norms placed on men. Maleness and femaleness are portrayed to be opposites, and both men and women are expected to obey these gender scripts set both culturally and socially. The treatment of women as sexual conquests by toxic masculinity ideology fuels persistent problems like rape culture. Toxic masculinity is not involved with every single man, but the problem is that it is incredibly normalized to think and act in a way that shows that using violence and hostility to solve problems is essential unless you want to come across as weak. Those who don't fit the stereotype of what it means to be a man may suffer exclusion as a result, especially among children and teenagers. So now we know the problem. The question is how to address it. Well, first I want to say that toxic masculinity is not all in the fault of men. Of course, people mistake responsibility for their actions, but the true thing at fault is society. We teach that running away from a conflict is a sign of cowardice, or discussing feelings is a wimpy activity. Even when women make relationship decisions, the man is referred to as whipped or emasculated. So how do we fix these societal norms? Well, we take it step by step. Instead of trying to change everyone, we start by educating our teenagers before they enter the adulting world. We should teach that it's okay to accept who you are and not succumb to stereotypes. Have difficult conversations with people who identify differently from you. Everyone is different, so there's never going to be a point where all of us have the same ideas and beliefs. But that's what makes us human. So, for this next topic, I'm going to ask for a little help from the audience. I'm just going to ask a few quick questions, and I want you to basically raise your hand if you agree or you want to say yes to them. So, who here has been to JK? Okay, SK? And grade 1? Okay, and who here has memories from JK? SK? Grade 1. Okay, thank you. And last question, who here has ever been in a romantic relationship? Don't be shy. Okay, thank you for that. I'm guessing you all are wondering why I did that, but I want to share something about me first. I remember my first ever relationship. It was in grade 1, and it was with a very nice boy named Nicholas. Of course, we were experts in communication and discussing our feelings, so we dated for one day. Well, actually, I think it was a marriage, but either way, it ended pretty quickly. Now that I'm older, I look on these times to see how everything's changed. In high school, relationships get a little more serious than one-day marriages and playdates. They can be fulfilling, but they also have a lot more responsibilities. A healthy relationship requires honesty, trust, respect, open communication between partners, and compromise on both sides. They take effort, and not everyone may want to be in one, but either way, having a healthy relationship and knowing how to create and maintain one is incredibly important and can be applied to things outside of the romantic circle. There are 4 major building blocks to having a healthy relationship. The first being boundaries. Maybe your partner likes having space, or they like to be with you every waking second of every single moment. There are many people who consider themselves as an object to please others, and often without realizing that by saying yes to everything their partner wants, they're saying no to something equally as important to them. That is something you do not want in your relationship. You guys need to meet each other's needs in ways you are both comfortable with. But how do you do that? The answer is completely obvious and somehow not put to use very often. Effective communication. You guys need to talk about each other and your feelings with each other, even when you don't agree, in ways where the other person can feel safe, heard, and not judged. The first step is to figure out if poor communication is being used, like passive aggressiveness or ignoring the other person. Then, after that, the next step is to put in practices like processing your feelings before talking to the other person, or finding a balance between talking and listening. The next step is to build trust, which takes time but allows couples to be vulnerable because they can rely on one another. An example of this could be giving opportunities to allow their partner to be trusted. Or when you feel the urge to check in, you instead give your partner space and privacy instead. The last step is consent. So giving consent, which is commonly used when being sexually active, means that you are okay with what is happening and no one is forcing you or guilting you into doing something you don't want to do. Consent can be given and withdrawn at any time, and providing consent once does not automatically mean that you will provide consent in the future. Here are some signs that mean what you are doing is not consensual. 1, a partner says out loud or indicates with their body language, no. They switch from a yes to a no with their words or actions. 3, they answer yes to one question, but no to another. 4, they are impaired by drugs or alcohol, or are unconscious or sleeping. Or 5, they feel intimidated, pressured, threatened, or coerced. I ask if you take anything from this talk with you, you take these. Now, having a healthy relationship is not just in relation to your love life. There are also relationships with family. Bumping heads is incredibly common and absolutely okay, but the key to having a healthy relationship is knowing how to talk things out. Direct communication and active listening can be used when you and your family are having disagreements and need to reaffirm on the common ground. So let me give an example. Say you and your sibling are fighting and a vase in the room breaks. You struggle over who actually broke it. The common ground here is that both of you are responsible because you were both being rough. So therefore, instead of fighting over whose fault it actually was, you both take responsibility. Now, I'm not sure if any of you are from comic books or anything like that, but I'm not a mind reader, so asking open and perspective questions are the key to make sure that we and our family members can get better, smarter, and easier to be with as we age. Listen and learn. So, here is an example. Say you're in an argument with your parents about going out with your friends. They say no, and you are talking about your different point of views on the situation. You explain it one way, and if that doesn't work, you explain it again and again until both parties are frustrated and exhausted. So what do? Well, keep in mind open perspective and open-ended questions, things like that. You usually start with how and what. But one of the most important ones is, what do you need from me? It shifts the emphasis from trying to explain yourself to attempting to understand the other person, and it also implies that you are willing to change in order to resolve some much needed conflict. Because misunderstandings are unavoidable in any family, learning how to talk things out and forgiving one another is a valuable skill. Instead of bottling up all those negative feelings, say something and air it out. Bringing things up calmly, respectfully, and using non-accusatory language increases the likelihood that a much-needed conversation will result in some practical new agreements that benefit all parties. The last thing I want you to remember is that you are surrounded by people who love you, and no argument is worth losing that. So, as Adulting 101 comes to a close, I want to make sure you guys know one more thing. You have power, and you can use it for good. I've taught you all what you should be learning and why. The importance of sex ed for all teenagers alike. The effects of COVID-19. How to have a healthy relationship. These are all things we should be taught and be educated on in the present and in the future. Now, I want you to implement these ideas in your life. I want you guys to go to your schools and tell them that they can be a part of the change that needs to happen. The truth is, we are the change. And we can tell our schools that we need all the information and education to truly be ready for the adulting world. I believe in you, and I believe in us. Thank you for coming.